I'm back with David.Benedictus, and this is part 8. Go ahead, David. Tell me about your time with meeting Francis Ford Coppola.
Well, we're talking about the summer of 1965, and I had published not only The 4th of June, which I've spoken about, but my second novel, which was a rites of passage novel called You're a Big Boy Now, which was a story of a young man falling in love with the most unsuitable woman who has an agenda, which is that she wants to punish any man who comes within her space. It was quite a lively novel, but it wasn't particularly good or exciting, but it was published in America. And I was, it was published in America. And then I was back in England and the phone went. I've been working at the Beeb, and the phone was a young guy who said that he was a young filmmaker, and he'd been reading my novel, and he said he'd only got $500 in the world, but that he would very much like to make a film out of my book, and if I was agreeable, why didn't we do that? In fact, the story which I got to find out about was that he'd won a literary competition run by MGM, this film studio, and his entry had not been a poem or a novel, which is what most people had done. It was a film script, and he'd been very good at MGM. He had been writing some films for them, from some film scripts which very eminent people had been supposed to be writing and hadn't got on with. And so, as a reward at the end of his year, they said he could make whatever film he wanted to. And since my novel had struck certain chords with him, he phoned me up and said he wanted to make a movie out of my novel. And I thought it was probably somebody having fun at my expense, because these things didn't really happen. But it turned out to be absolutely true. And his friend Tony Bill, who was then an actor, but was to become a Hollywood producer. He still is a Hollywood producer, I think now. Tony Bill had read the book, had given it to him, and said, "How about this for your film project?" And so he set off trying to get a young, lively cast together. And I had a message from him one day. I've got it down here. He said, "Hi David," this was a telephone call. "Hi David, just thought I'd let you know that the studio offered me a $7 million budget with Warren Beatty and Natalie Wood, but I knew you didn't want that kind of a picture, so I've turned it down." Because in the morning I thought I must have dreamt it, but no, it wasn't the sort of movie he wanted. So he went away and he continued writing it. He'd send me later drafts as they came along, and I would make my comments on them. Then I'd write a draft and he'd make his comments on those. And I visited him in Paris and we worked together on it. Tony Bill would play the leading man's friend, because he'd seen a nice part in it for him. And it was to be set in New York. And at the same time that was filming in New York, because indeed it did get made.
And what was it called?
It was called You're a Big Boy Now,
Oh,
the
same title.
A film called The Graduate was being shot in California.
Right.
And that was important because Francis said to me, "I don't know if you could get me the Beatles to do the soundtrack." And I did know Paul slightly, I didn't know the others at all. But I spoke to the Beatles manager and the answer was no. So Francis, a little disappointed, nonetheless he got the Lovin' Spoonful and John Sebastian to do the soundtrack to the film. And the main song was a song called "Darling Be Home Soon," which was very poignant, which was used the other day by McDonald's in a big advertising campaign they were running on television. So I could listen to this pretty tune and remind me of the film as the advertisement continued to run.
Is he still alive, Coppola?
Oh yes, very much so. He is still alive, but he doesn't make films anymore. His daughter Sophia does, and his granddaughter is starting to make films too. But he runs a vineyard in the Napa Valley, and he was very nice to my daughter and son-in-law when they were visiting California, and I gave them his contact number, and they phoned him up, and he said, "Come round and he gave them a tour of the vineyard, and he gave them several bottles of wine, I think. That was very kind. I haven't seen him since the Cannes showing of You're a Big Boy Now, which was 1966, because it was the American entry at Cannes.
Yeah,
But I haven't seen him since then. I was planning to meet him and talk to him when I was in California doing a program for the BBC about music in the movies. But sadly, I had run out of money, and I phoned up. I phoned up Francis and said, I'd like to come and see you, but I haven't any money. And he said, well, that's no good. I'd love you to come, but I haven't any money either.
I bet he made money after The Godfather, though.
No, he threw all his money away.
What do you mean he threw it away?
Well, he had a series of disasters. He'd buy the rights in something and it would never get made if nobody else would stake it. And I mean, Apocalypse Now, which he directed, great disasters. The leading man was killed when they'd shot 2/3 of the film, and they had a typhoon that destroyed the set. I mean, awful things. And he was a great gambler. He loved losing money, and I think probably the reason he went to the Napa Valley was because he probably had enough of it anyway. So he got some big names to play cameo roles. Geraldine Page was in it. Julie Harris was in it, and to begin with, we were filming. The first scene we were shooting was in the public library on Fifth Avenue, and it was a big scene in the plot, and it had all the main actors were in it. But he was very nervous. He'd shot a little sort of homemade ghost story called Dementia 5, it was called. He filmed it in Ireland, but it never had any kind of release or anything. So this was his first time with a whole crew and a whole cast there. And it went to 27 takes. He was too nervous to gay print it. And with every take, I learned a bit about filmmaking, because Julie Harris, who was gorgeous and starred opposite James Dean in East of Eden and things like that, Julie Harris, that is, she gave the same performance every time, but Geraldine Page, who was playing the leading guy's mother, she improved on her performance with each take, and she was a true film actress in that sense.
I know her son, and I've also stayed in her house.
Really?
Yeah,
well, she was married to Rip Torn III.
He was still alive.
And Rip Torn III is still alive, and he was also in the film.
Yeah.
So I knew Rip Torn. And anyway, we went ahead, and it was great fun. The leading part was taken by a Canadian actor who never did anything else except a few soap operas. The leading girl, which was really the main part in the film and was based a bit on Sarah Miles, was played by Elizabeth Hartman, who was a bit of a star. She had played in A Patch of Blue opposite Sidney Poitier. She'd been blind in that, and she played in The Group, in which she was the pregnant one. And when Francis asked her to play the sexy part in our film, Elizabeth said, but I'm the one who's either blind or pregnant. You've got the wrong girl. Very charming. She was lovely, Elizabeth, and very good actress. But sadly, she married a Marine and it all went wrong. She jumped out of a flat window, I think, when she was 40 or something. Very, very sad. The film, as I mentioned, was the American entry at the Cannes Film Festival. And the French loved it, because they tended to like anything that was American. So as we were going to the big screening, the French people would come up to me and say, "Are you the big boy?" And I would say,
"Are you the big boy?"
And after this screening, there was a big party at one of the nightclubs in Cannes, and I danced with this highly desirable girl, and she said, "Come round at midday tomorrow, and I'll see you by the pool." She gave me the address of where she was staying. Yeah. And round the pool were these two scrappy-looking young men who turned out to be Keith Richards and one of the other Rolling Stones. I can't remember now.
Yeah.
But of course I didn't know who they were, so that was no good, was it?
Yeah, but you were the big boy. Okay, we'll end there. Thank you very much.